I had spent 6 brutal months surviving on coffee, pressure, and barely 4 hours of sleep a night. The only thing keeping me steady was the thought of my lake house in the Catskills, my sanctuary, the one place in the world that felt like mine. I bought it myself, saved for it myself, and poured my heart into every detail. I kept telling myself, just get there. Just breathe once you arrive. But when I finally pulled into the driveway, ready to collapse into peace, the air was thick with dust instead of pine. The moment I opened the door, my stomach twisted. My kitchen was gone. My living room, my cozy, warm living room. Nothing but torn-out walls, exposed beams, broken tiles, wires hanging like snapped nerves. It looked like someone had taken a crowbar to my heart and swung until everything I loved was unrecognizable. I just stood there, unable to move, unable to make sense of any of it. This was my house, my safe place, and it looked like a construction zone. Before I could even speak, I heard voices behind me. "Surprise!" my mom called out, walking in with my dad as if this was some kind of celebration. They were smiling, actually smiling, while I stood there surrounded by the ruins of my home. What happened here? I asked, barely able to form the words. My dad shrugged casually. "We thought you'd be happy. We're renovating it. Bodhi and Tamsin will be moving in soon, so we wanted it ready for them." I blinked at them, thinking I must have heard wrong. "You're renovating my house? For Bodhi?" "Yes," my mom said, as if she were explaining something obvious. "You weren't using it enough. And since we helped you with money years ago, we figured it made sense." I stared at them, completely stunned. "You gave me $5,000 as a graduation gift. That does not make this house yours. This house is legally mine." My mom waved her hand like my words were nothing. "Well, you nodded when we mentioned Bodhi needing somewhere to stay. So we assumed you meant yes." I felt a cold, sharp anger spreading through me. A nod? They demolished my home because of a nod they imagined meant permission? I walked through the wreckage slowly, each step heavier than the last. Every scratch, every broken tile, every ripped-out cabinet felt like a punch. I had worked for this. I had earned this. And they had walked in and destroyed it as if my ownership didn't matter at all. They were still talking behind me, excitedly, like they had done me a favor, but their voices faded into the background. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, loud and angry, pulsing through the ruins of the life I built. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't just shocked. I was done being treated like I didn't matter. I stood in the middle of the wrecked house, still trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called my best friend, Lorna. The moment she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. I explained what I had walked into and what my parents had said. There was a long, tense silence before she finally spoke. "June, this is completely illegal." Hearing her say it out loud made everything feel sharper, more real. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining the violation. What happened wasn't a misunderstanding or a harmless mistake. It was wrong on every level. Lorna told me to stay calm and start collecting proof before anyone tried to cover their tracks. Her steady voice helped me take my first full breath since stepping into the house. After the call ended, I felt my shock slowly shift into something colder and stronger. I walked from room to room, taking photos of every broken tile, every demolished wall, every piece of torn-out flooring. I recorded videos showing the damage from all angles. I opened cabinets, only to find many of them gone, and filmed the empty spaces. With each click of the camera, my fear faded, replaced by a heavy determination that settled deep inside me. This was my property, and someone had ripped it apart without permission. As I moved through the house, memories of my family flashed through my mind. Growing up, it had always been clear who mattered most. Bodhi was the favorite, the one they praised, defended, and excused no matter what he did. The golden child, as everyone joked. I had accepted the unfairness for years, letting it pass because fighting it felt pointless. I thought keeping distance would protect me. But standing in the ruins of my own home, I saw the truth more clearly than ever. Their favoritism wasn't harmless. It had grown into something dangerous. Entitlement had become permission in their eyes. They had taken something I owned, something I worked for, and treated it like it belonged to him. Like my effort meant nothing. Like my voice didn't matter. This wasn't just a bad decision or a crossed line. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than anything they had done before. They hadn't thought twice. They hadn't cared how I would feel. All that mattered was giving Bodhi what he wanted. I set my phone down for a moment and looked around the half-destroyed room. The anger rising in me wasn't loud or wild. It was steady, quiet, and absolute. For the first time, I knew I couldn't let this go. I couldn't pretend it didn't matter. I couldn't keep playing the role they pushed me into all my life. Something inside me hardened. This time, I was going to stand up for myself. I was still walking through the wrecked rooms when I heard footsteps outside. Before I could prepare myself, Bodhi and Tamsin walked in, smiling as if they were stepping into a place that already belonged to them. They were holding rolled-up blueprints, talking excitedly about walls they wanted to move and colors they planned to use. It was like they had stepped into a dream, while I was standing in a nightmare. They didn't even notice the look on my face at first. They spread the papers across the dusty counter and started pointing at sections, already imagining their new life here. When they finally turned toward me, they looked confused, as if my anger made no sense. "Why do you look like that?" Bodhi asked, frowning. "We told Mom and Dad our ideas. They said you were fine with it." I felt my chest tighten. "This is my house," I said calmly. "You had no right to destroy anything." Tamsin exchanged a shocked look with Bodhi, like I was the one being unreasonable. "We thought you understood," she said softly, almost pitying. "You're busy all the time. You don't even come here much." Then Bodhi stepped closer, his voice sharp. "June, stop acting like this is some big deal. You don't need a place like this. You're always working. You don't even appreciate it the way we do." I stared at him, stunned by how easily the words came out of his mouth. He kept going, as if he were explaining something obvious. "Honestly, you're being selfish. You have everything, your job, your money, your freedom. And we're starting a family. We deserve a real home. You don't deserve this house the way we do." Hearing my own brother say those words felt like a slap. He truly believed it. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mistake. This was entitlement so deep that he couldn't see how wrong he was. I felt something heavy inside me break. "Get out," I said quietly. Tamsin's eyes widened. "June, you can't be serious." "Get out," I repeated louder this time. "Both of you. Right now." Bodhi stepped back, shocked, as if the idea of being told to leave my property was impossible. "Wow," he muttered. "You really are cold. No wonder you're alone." His words were meant to hurt, and they did, but not in the way he expected. They only made the truth clearer. They gathered their blueprints with stiff movements. As they headed toward the door, Bodhi threw one last look at me, disbelief mixed with anger, as if I had stolen something from him. The moment they left, the house felt unbearably quiet. I stood in the middle of the mess, shaking not from fear but from a painful clarity. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to suddenly understand what they had done. I pulled out my phone and found the number I needed. My hand didn't tremble as I pressed call. "Genevieve," I said the second she answered. "I need your help." And with that, the real fight began. Genevieve listened to everything without interrupting, and when I finished, her voice was steady and firm. She didn't act surprised by what my family had done. Instead, she moved straight into action. She laid out a clear plan, one that left no room for hesitation. The first step was sending cease and desist letters to my parents and to the contractors they hired. The next was a formal demand that they pay for every bit of damage done to my property. There was nothing soft or gentle in her explanation, and I appreciated that. I needed someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for me when I felt completely alone. Hearing her list each step made everything feel real. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was going to be a legal fight, and I had every right to pursue it. Genevieve told me exactly what documents she needed, and assured me we would move quickly. Her confidence made my own resolve even stronger. After we hung up, I took a deep breath and opened the family group chat. For years, I had stayed quiet to keep the peace, but now there was nothing left to protect. I typed a short, direct message. I didn't add emotion or explanations. I simply wrote the truth. The house was legally mine, they had no permission to touch it, and I was taking action to fix the damage and hold everyone responsible. I told them I would be pursuing every legal remedy available. Then I sent it without letting myself overthink. The reaction came almost instantly. My phone lit up with messages so fast that I could barely read one before another arrived. The calm tone I used didn't matter, not to them. They twisted my words into attacks I never made. They said I was heartless, dramatic, and ungrateful. They claimed I was trying to ruin the family over something small. They accused me of turning on them without reason, as if I had destroyed the house myself. My mother sent long paragraphs talking about how much they had done for me. My father wrote that I was embarrassing them. Bodhi jumped in, calling me cruel and acting like I had betrayed him, not the other way around. Even distant relatives began popping into the chat, repeating the same lines they had fed them for years. That I was difficult, that I didn't care about family, that I always made things harder than they needed to be. The more they wrote, the clearer everything became. They had no intention of taking responsibility. They needed a villain, and they wanted it to be me. It was easier for them to twist the story than to admit they had crossed a line no one should ever cross. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I let the messages stack up while I stood in the middle of my broken home and felt my resolve settle deeper. Their words couldn't undo what they had done, and they couldn't stop what was coming. The lines were drawn now, and there was no turning back. I stopped checking the messages that kept pouring into my phone. Every time it buzzed, I felt the same mix of anger and exhaustion, so I turned the sound off and put it aside. Instead of letting their words distract me, I focused on what Genevieve needed. If my family wanted to twist the truth, then I would gather every piece of proof that showed exactly what happened. I went to the small cabinet where I kept all my important papers. I pulled out the folder with the deed, the mortgage statements, and the receipts for everything I had bought for the house. I laid them out on the table one by one, making sure each page was clear and easy to read. Seeing my own name on the documents gave me a sense of control I had been missing since I stepped into the wrecked house. These papers were simple facts, and facts could not be argued with. Next, I opened my old laptop where I had stored photos over the years. I clicked through the albums, finding pictures I took the day I bought the house. I found photos of the freshly painted walls, the kitchen I had chosen piece by piece, and the living room I decorated slowly as I saved money. I watched short videos where I had shown my friends the view from the deck, proud and excited about the home I worked so hard to own. Now those images were more than memories. They were evidence of what had been destroyed without permission. I copied everything into a new folder, labeling each file clearly so Genevieve could use them easily. For the first time since the shock hit me, I felt steady. Every photo I saved, every document I organized, helped me regain some of the strength I felt they had tried to take from me. After gathering the paperwork and photos, I went outside to find the contractor, who was still working near the driveway. He looked surprised to see me, but not nervous. I kept my voice calm as I asked him simple questions. Who hired him, what instructions he had been given, and what exactly he had been told about the house. He answered honestly, without hesitation. He explained that my parents had hired him directly. They had ordered a full-scale remodel, and he believed the house was being prepared for their son. He talked openly, assuming I already knew. I kept recording the conversation with my phone in my pocket, just like Genevieve had advised. Hearing him confirm everything made something inside me go still. There was no confusion, no misunderstanding, no mixed message. My parents had planned all of this behind my back. They had treated my home like it was theirs to change and theirs to give away. When I walked back inside, I felt different. I had what I needed. I had proof. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt ready for whatever came next. The letters went out early in the morning. Genevieve moved quickly, sending both the cease and desist and the formal demand for payment. Once they were delivered, there was no way for my family to pretend they didn't know what they had done. The silence didn't last long. Within hours, my voicemail filled with message after message. Some were furious, others sounded almost frightened, but all of them were loud and emotional. They acted shocked that I had taken a legal step, even though they were the ones who had crossed every line. I didn't answer any of the calls. I didn't respond to the messages. I let the anger play out on their side while I stayed focused on what Genevieve had told me to do. Every voicemail was the same, accusations, guilt, blame, but none of them changed the fact that they had ignored the law. Instead of admitting anything, they acted like I had attacked them without warning. By the afternoon, I got an email from Genevieve saying my parents had hired their own lawyer. She added that he was a longtime friend of my father's, which told me exactly what kind of defense they were planning. A few hours later, his response arrived. His message was brief and weak. He claimed my parents believed they had implied permission to enter the house and remodel it. He said the permission came from the money they had once given me, and from a vague gesture they insisted counted as agreement. Reading it made me feel a cold disbelief. They were clinging to anything, even something that made no sense. A small gift from years ago and a supposed nod could not erase documents with my name on them. It was clear they were trying to twist the situation into something that made them look innocent. I forwarded the email to Genevieve, and she called me right away. She didn't sound surprised by their defense. She told me the claim had no real strength and wouldn't hold up anywhere. She explained that because they had ignored the cease and desist, and because the damage to the property was already done, the next step was unavoidable. The only way forward now was a lawsuit. Her voice was steady as she went over the plan. She said we would file for trespass and destruction of property. She reminded me that I had every piece of proof needed: documents, photos, videos, and even the contractor's words. She said we were prepared, and the law was clearly on my side. I listened quietly, letting her words settle. A legal fight was never something I wanted, but everything had moved past the point of repair. My family was refusing to take responsibility, and they were choosing to fight rather than admit the truth. When the call ended, I sat in the silence of the damaged house and accepted what was coming. The real battle was about to begin, and there was no turning back. I spent the morning meeting with contractors, walking them through every corner of my house, pointing out every broken wall, every missing cabinet, every scratch and dent that hadn't been there before. Each quote they gave me was higher than I expected, but not surprising considering the damage. The numbers added up quickly, over $85,000 just to bring the house back to how it was. It was a shocking amount, but the responsibility was not mine. Legally, my parents had caused this destruction, and they had to pay. I sat at the kitchen table with all 3 quotes laid out in front of me. Each one was detailed, listing materials, labor, and time. Seeing it in black and white made everything feel real. This wasn't just about anger or betrayal anymore. It was about money, law, and accountability. I could have turned away and let them get away with it, but that wasn't me. I had worked too hard for this house to let anyone take it from me. I called Genevieve and explained everything. I told her the quotes and asked her to advise me on the next steps. Her voice was calm but firm, as always. After listening, she asked the question I had been thinking about but was hesitant to say aloud. Did I want to move forward with the lawsuit? I took a deep breath and nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yes, I had to. I authorized her to file the civil suit against my parents, and since Bodhi had been involved in the plan, he would be included as well. Making that call felt heavier than anything else I had done that day. It wasn't easy to take legal action against my own family, and part of me ached at the thought of the rift this would create. I had loved them once, trusted them, believed in their fairness. But standing in my damaged home and reading their messages, hearing their excuses, it was impossible to ignore the reality. They had made their choice. I had to make mine. Once the call ended, I sat back and let the weight settle. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because finally, I was taking control, demanding justice for what was mine. Sadness because this decision confirmed something I hadn't wanted to admit. There was no going back. The trust one had in them was gone, and the family I thought I had no longer existed in the way I believed it did. It was a painful truth, but accepting it was necessary. I looked around my ruined house one last time before leaving for the day. The path ahead was clear, even if it was difficult. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. The legal battle was now real, and the divide between me and my family had become permanent. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of control returning, knowing I was standing up for what was rightfully mine. As the lawsuit moved forward, I started hearing from people I hadn't expected. Family members and old friends reaching out, but not to support me. My parents and Bodhi had begun spreading stories, twisting what happened into something that made me look like the villain. They told anyone who would listen that I was selfish, dramatic, and tearing the family apart over nothing. It was exhausting seeing people I trusted suddenly doubt me, but I knew I couldn't let their words control me. I remembered what Lorna had told me. Don't get emotional, don't argue, just stick to the facts. It wasn't easy, especially when messages came in that were meant to hurt, guilt me, or make me question myself. But I followed her advice. Every time someone asked what had happened, I kept my responses short, clear, and truthful. I told them exactly what I knew. My house had been demolished without my permission, so it could be given to my brother. I explained that I had documented the damage, gathered evidence, and was now taking legal action. Nothing extra, nothing emotional, just facts. At first, the cold, factual approach felt awkward. People expected me to explain myself, to apologize, to justify my anger. But the facts didn't need justifying. The documents, the photos, the contractor's statements, they all spoke for themselves. I could stay calm because I knew the truth was on my side, even if others wanted to twist it. Slowly, I began noticing cracks in their story. Some relatives who had initially sided with my parents reached out privately. They asked questions, unsure if what they were hearing really made sense. When I shared simple, clear details, they began to see the reality behind the lies. The careful evidence I had collected made it harder for my parents and Bodhi to keep the narrative alive. I realized that while they tried to control people with gossip, the truth had a quiet but stronger power. Even with the smear campaign ongoing, I felt more steady. I wasn't trying to win everyone's approval. I was only showing the truth. And for the first time, I could see that their plan to make me look like a villain wasn't fully working. Some people were beginning to notice, questioning what they had been told. It gave me hope that the facts I held would eventually stand above all the lies. I stayed focused, knowing that remaining calm, honest, and factual was the best way to protect myself and my home. The day of the settlement meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of nervousness and determination as I walked into the conference room. Genevieve had prepared me for everything, but there was still a weight in the air I couldn't shake. My parents and Bodhi were already there, sitting stiffly across from me. Their faces were tight with anger, but I could see something else underneath: fear. Fear of the truth, fear of the law, fear of the financial consequences they now faced. The lawyer for my parents, a friend of my father, looked uncomfortable. He spoke quietly to them at first, reminding them of the overwhelming evidence I had gathered: documents, photos, videos, and the contractor's statements. He pointed out that if the case went to court, they would have no real defense. Every claim they had made about permission, or about me being difficult, would collapse under the facts. The more he spoke, the more my parents' confidence seemed to shrink. Finally, the room went quiet, and the discussion turned to settlement terms. Genevieve laid out what needed to happen. My parents were required to pay the full cost of restoring the house to its original state. They also had to cover damages for the stress and loss caused by their actions. And, most importantly, they had to sign an agreement formally renouncing any claim to the property. There would be no chance for them to contest ownership in the future. Bodhi shifted in his seat, glancing at my parents, clearly frustrated that he couldn't argue or avoid the consequences. My parents exchanged quiet words, their faces showing a mix of anger and reluctant acceptance. It was clear they understood that the courtroom would not favor them, and any fight would only make things worse. I remained calm, speaking only when Genevieve asked for confirmation. I didn't need to argue or explain. The facts were on my side, and the legal documents made my position unshakable. As the papers were signed one by one, a strange mixture of relief and finality settled over me. This was the end of the long battle they had forced upon me. Their anger was still visible, but it no longer had power over me. They could no longer threaten my home, my peace, or my security. Everything was now legally clear, and the house was fully mine again. Once the last signature was on the agreement, Genevieve gathered the documents and smiled at me. I felt a wave of calm wash over me as I realized that the house, my home, and my boundaries were finally protected. My parents and Bodhi had no choice but to accept responsibility and step back. After months of chaos, betrayal, and stress, the legal reckoning had given me justice and the control I had fought so hard to regain. With the settlement complete, I finally had the resources to restore my lake house. I walked through every room with the contractors, showing them exactly how I wanted things done. Every wall, every cabinet, every detail mattered. I watched as the old tiles were replaced, the kitchen rebuilt, and the living room returned to the warm, welcoming space it had been before. It was slow work, but I stayed involved every step of the way, making sure nothing was rushed or overlooked. This house was mine, and I was determined to bring it back perfectly. As the days passed, I saw my home slowly transform. Dust and debris disappeared, replaced by clean floors and carefully painted walls. The furniture was returned to its proper place, the decorations hung just as I had always planned, and the scent of fresh paint and polished would replace the chaos that had filled the rooms for so long. Each small improvement felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been stolen. It was more than just a house. It was the proof that I could stand up for myself and protect what I had worked for. Finally, the restoration was complete. I stepped back and looked around, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The house was exactly as I remembered, perhaps even better in some ways. I walked onto the deck and looked out over the lake. The water was calm, the trees reflected in its surface, and the quiet stretched around me like a soft blanket. For the first time in months, I could breathe fully without tension knotting my chest. I realized that this house was more than walls and furniture. It was my sanctuary, my space of peace and independence. By taking control and insisting on justice, I hadn't just saved the building, I had saved my sense of self. Every corner of this restored home reminded me that I had the strength to defend what was mine and to create boundaries no one could cross without permission. The family that betrayed me was gone from my life, and I felt a freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The silence by the lake was no longer lonely or heavy. It was comforting. It was a sound of victory, of peace finally returned. I sat on the deck, watching the sun dip behind the trees, and for the first time, I felt fully at ease. My home, my life, and my peace were back, and no one could take that away from me. Do you think I was right to take legal action against my family and reclaim my house? Or should I have forgiven them and let it go? I'm really curious to hear what you think, so leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates.